Hello and welcome to the very first Photography News podcast. We've been talking about doing this for ages, but it's taken a global health crisis for it to actually happen. My name is Roger Payne. I'm the editorial director at Photography News, and I have joining me today at safe distance, I'd like to point out, probably about 50 miles apart from one another. I have two other members of the PN team, and we're going to chat through a few things about what we've been shooting, even on these in this lockdown situation, what you can shoot, answer a couple of questions, and then hopefully leave you in about 20 minutes, half an hour with a load of ideas in your head. So just to introduce the people who are with me today, first of all, contributing editor, Kingsley Singleton.
Hello.
How are you? Are you good?
I'm all right. Welcome to my back bedroom. Great sonics in here.
And also, we have obviously the most important person, the editor of PN and Mr. Photography himself, Will Cheung. Hi, Will.
How you doing, guys? All very good here, and thank you for the introduction. Sounds awesome, Mr. Photography. I love that.
Yeah, I'm just pandering to your ego, Will. That's what it's all about. So, Will? Why don't we start with you? Because you've actually recently come back from a trip, haven't you? Where have you been?
Well, funnily enough, I'm actually meant to be in America right now, because we planned to go to Arizona a few months back, obviously. And after the photography show, we thought, my partner Andy and I were going to go to Arizona, photograph Antelope Canyon, Headstone, Horseshoe Bend, and just have a great time taking pictures. Well, obviously they got canned. So we managed to book a few days up in the Yorkshire Dales. So we stayed in Aysgarth, we did some waterfall shooting, all was going swimmingly. I know we had a problem, obviously, with the virus, but we weren't in a lockdown situation. Then, of course, on Friday evening, we got back to the pub we were staying in, and the door was shut. We thought, that's a bit odd. Anyway, we banged on the door, managed to get our way in, and the landlord said, well, basically, the Prime Minister has shut us down. So we did some waterfall shooting in lieu of actually going to Arizona, and he loved the Dales, but obviously our trip was then curtailed. So I'm now back in Cambourne where I live.
Safe
so
and
that's
sound.
been kind of my few days.
So what about you, Kingsley? Have you been up to much?
Yeah, well, sort of like everyone else, just kind of adjusting a bit. I think loads of people have made this joke about, but when you're a freelancer, you're basically, you've been self-isolating for years anyway, haven't you? It's kind of like, I'm not used to human contact that much, so it's not that weird for me. But a bit like Will, I was out when the announcement about lockdown happened. I'd gone out almost in a sort of like a sixth sense thing. Like Monday afternoon, I thought I've got to get out of the house. So I went and I went up a local church tower because I know one of the tower wardens, and I ended up doing a lot of shots up there and a kind of a day to night, like a day to night scene where you shoot one exposure at about 4 o'clock, and then I waited until about 7 o'clock to get the last one, and then you put them in Photoshop and you kind of blend it all together and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I actually got back that I realized that was my last chance. I'd taken my last chance almost without realizing it to escape. Although given the kind of I don't know if other people, listeners and things have kind of actually done that kind of thing, going up high spots, high church towers and things like that. The older I get, the worse I get with heights. It was so sort of vertiginous. It's like you've got basically like this particular church tower, you've got like maybe 1.5 foot width of kind of gantry between you and these kind of, I don't know what you'd call them, battlements, battlements on a church, I don't know. But you're sort of tiptoeing around, and then you have to try and put a tripod up. It's really quite sort of demanding, and it was freezing. Sun went down, and it was immediately freezing. So I kind of I very nearly expired up there. What about you, Roger? What have you been up to?
Well, nothing quite so glamorous, and you certainly wouldn't get me up a church tower, because I think it must be an age thing, because I hate heights. I'm much more modest in my photographic achievements over the last few days. In that all that I get to do at the moment is, like the rest of the UK and possibly 3/4 of the world as well, all I get to do is go out once a day with my dog, walk the dog, and take my camera with me and take some pictures there. But it has been rather beautiful in the UK over the last few mornings. If you've been getting up at sort of 6:37 as I have, there's a lot of frost around. There's a lot of sort of early morning mist. there's actually a lot to shoot. And the beauty of the fact that I live absolutely in the middle of nowhere means that I can actually stop and take a few pics because there's nobody walking within 2 meters of me. Although I obviously appreciate that not everybody is in that fortunate position. But so it's been okay. It's been okay, but it is a kind of slightly weird old world that we're living in at the moment. And I think just to extend something that you mentioned there, Kingsley, is that what we would really like this podcast to be is not just basically the three of us sitting chatting in our respective back bedrooms. We'd very much like to hear from PN readers, and we will cover off the ways in which you can get in touch with us at the end of this podcast. So moving on, why don't we give our listeners a few ideas about what they could actually shoot? Because it is a challenge, but there are plenty of things that you could still do while you're on lockdown in your home. So I've got an idea. I know Kingsley's got a couple of ideas, but Will, why don't we start with you? What would you suggest?
Well, one thing I like playing with is still lives and doing things like water droplets and things like that. Now, of course, shooting water droplets requires kit and a bit of expertise, but something which actually you can do with just one flash gun and a camera lens, like a macro lens, to focus quite closely, is to use food dyes and drop food dyes in the water. I went to my local Morrison's. I've got some reds, yellows, oranges, blues and greens, and basically I've got all these ready. I've got this glass bowl ready, and I'll just drop these things into water, and as they hit the water, they spread out and make these lovely patterns in the water. So then I'll get my flash gun and a macro lens, bing, bang, bosh.
Yeah, can you just explain the setup a bit in terms of, so camera at sort of table at height and flash over the top, or how's the setup?
Okay, well, you preempted me in a way, Roger, because I haven't actually done it yet. But I have bought the food dyes. I have got the bowl ready, and I've got a flash gun ready. So basically, I've got a flash gun which I can control from the camera. So it's an off-camera flash. I'll have a camera on with a macro lens on a tripod in front of the bowl, and obviously the bowl is quite a thick glass bowl. It's a Pyrex bowl, but that shouldn't affect the quality too much. And it's not all about quality; it's about the look and feel of these wonderful patterns as the water as a food dye hits the water.
Have you got your food dyes yet?
Yeah, I've got the food dyes because I bought them before lockdown. Because I was thinking about this already.
So you're not thinking back out again. You can't get me a few bits.
Well, if you need help, Kingsley, that's fine. I'm going to shop for you. But anyway, back to my food dyes. Yeah, I've got a range of colours. I haven't actually done it yet, but I'm ready for it. I've got a bowl, I've got the camera, the tripod, the flash gun. All I'm going to do is merge them all together and get on with it.
So I'm just trying to understand. So do you just get one drip and that's it, and then you have to chuck the water away and do it again, right?
Well, that sounds like the case, but I've seen examples where people have put in, let's say, a lighter colour. They might try to do yellow or an orange and photograph that, and then they put in a darker colour, and sometimes the two colours can mix. So I'm going to try these two different ways. I'm going to try the side-on view. So as a food dye goes into the water and spreads out like roots, I can shoot it from the side. But also I'm going to try it from above. So I'll have the sheet of white card underneath the bowl, drop the water in, and you may do things like just give the water a little whiz with a finger, or with I've got a chopstick, for instance. So I drop the colour in, give it a little twist, a little twirl. And what's wrong with a chopstick? It's perfectly sensible.
We've all got a chopstick.
We've all got a chopstick.
And then as a pattern swirls around, you can add different colours. And I don't know, this is the thing of experimentation. You know, it's not as if we'd be short of time. We're stuck indoors and only go out for a half an hour exercise, which I'm going to do later. Let's do some photography and experiment. And then if you mix up the colours and it goes wrong, pour the water away and start again.
I think definitely still life is I think anyone who's ever done any kind of still life knows that you sort of look at your watch at the start and you look at your watch again and like hours sort of fly by, don't they? Particularly when you're kind of like just making minor changes to composition or with a technique like water droplets or anything like that. There are so many variations of it that you can try over and over and over again. You get a different thing every time, and by the end of the process, you're going to be a hell of a lot better at doing it because it's all brilliant practice.
I think also the thing is, once you start it and you get some results, you think that's quite good. And then you get them up on screen, you think if only you did this or did that. There's an awful lot of tweaking to get involved here. So I think there is room for experimentation. It does take up a lot of time, and that's what we've got right now. And I'm sure my techniques will evolve as the days go on, because we're going to be here for a little while, and I'll find some colours work better than others. I might find something more useful than a chopstick to twiddle my water around, and it's just going to be fun for me. Keep myself busy.
And just, you mentioned at the top there, Will, that you're going to shoot with a macro lens. Obviously, not everyone is as well heeled as you and has a macro lens. What about? I'm assuming that you can use stuff like extension tubes, and also you could even just shoot it with a standard zoom, right, and then crop in on the computer later.
Yeah, extension tubes is obviously an option, but again, not everybody's got that. But most lenses focus quite closely nowadays, so just focus as close as you can get. And like I said right from the outset, it's not all about quality, it's about the pictorial effect. So if you can't get close enough, you have to crop in, then so be it. But you're shooting with flash, so you can keep your ISO nice and low, so you can blow it without any noise problems. And I think it's just, like I said, a bit of fun. And it might come back to our, if we get there, our next podcast, I'll be going, I scrapped the idea, it didn't work. I might actually say, it's brilliant, and these colours work really well.
Well, actually, we're going to do one better than that, Will, because you've committed to it now. So what we obviously all want you to do is, when you've done the pictures, is share them on the Photography News social media streams. So we'll get them up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You've heard it here, folks. He's going to do it now. So there's no backing out, Mr. Cheung. So just moving on. So Kingsley, you've got something slightly different that you're going to recommend people get up to, right?
Yeah. It's a bit more prosaic. Yeah. Well, I was thinking more about just the amount of pictures that we shoot. We shoot so much these days, and we kind of, and we all know that kind of capture is a bit more interesting than processing. But so you end up with loads and loads of pictures, folders and folders, gigs and terabytes of images. And, a situation like this is a great time to go back through even stuff you shot quite a long time ago and revisit it, process it in perhaps new ways that you've learned. Your style might have changed over the last few years a bit. You might look at a way you've processed a picture 2 or 3 years ago. You might want to do it differently. You might have learned new stuff, and that's what I've been doing anyway. So I've been going through lots of landscape folders. You want to cut in there, Roger?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in your case, you might actually have learned how to get it sharp in the last 2 or 3 years, right?
Everything's less sharp, actually. As the resolution's getting bigger, everything looks less sharp to me. I think I should go the opposite direction.
But how are you going to kind of approach this in terms of, what you're going to pick out to reprocess? Is there a kind of a process that you go through to decide what you reprocess?
I think it's just looking for things that perhaps you didn't see before. I went through a load of folders recently of pictures that I'd taken on Spurn Point in Yorkshire, which is now, interestingly, I think Yorkshire's only sort of tidal island or something, because a load of the point was swept away in a storm a couple of years ago. But yeah, so I went back through and I found a load of pictures that I'd kind of discarded, and I reprocessed them, and I was sort of really pleased with them. And I put them on my Instagram and got a few likes, and it was sort of a digital social interaction.
Going back to motivation and why Kingsley's doing it, I did something very similar. Actually, only last night I started doing it. I thought in this time of idleness at home, I'll start working on my website, which I haven't touched for probably 2 years. And I went back through some pictures I took in Iceland back in 2015. And actually, you're right, Roger, because my tastes have changed, and they're still gritty and black and white, and hopefully my skills have changed too and developed. And I reworked maybe a bunch of them. Actually, you can go see them. They're actually on my website right now, which is, you don't mind if I plug myself here, do you, Rog? But my website is williamcheung.co.uk. And it's a gallery there of Iceland pictures, which I've recently just reprocessed, basically in line with what Kingsley is saying.
The more you go, it's a bit like the still life thing. The more you go down that kind of particular rabbit hole, the more you'll find things. And, it's about, it's not only about sort of, making changes in exposure or kind of processing that way. It's about cropping things, and it's about grouping images together and creating series and things like that. So again, like the Spurn Point thing, I thought, actually, I hadn't really realized I've been there maybe 10 times. It wasn't until I looked at all these folders and thought, I can probably, I've got like a wall's worth of pictures of lighthouses and, rotting old pieces of wood in the sea and sunsets and dawns and all these other kind of things. So, it's like, I definitely advise that as a way of kind of keeping yourself amused.
I was going to ask, actually, you've led onto it perfectly, is printing stuff out. I know, for example, Will, I know you're a massive advocate, aren't you, of printing your work out. Are you going to be doing much more of that while you're stuck in?
Well, I do believe that the final part of this, the workflow of photography, is to hold a finished print in your hand. So I will be doing a bit more printing. I have got some ideas as well, because I want to produce a portfolio of limited prints of my work, of my time in photography. So yes, printing is definitely something on my list of things to do.
Is this just a constant attempt for you to get advert of your skills, Will?
Yeah, absolutely.
Limited prints will be available.
Yeah, if we're using this as a way of selling stuff, I've got an old BMW I'm trying to get rid of. If that,
You've been trying to get rid of that for years, haven't you? Anyway.
Well, just to add into this, I mean, the quick technique that I was going to mention that I was going to give it a try is cross polarization, which used to be quite a complicated old thing, but because of the advent of computer monitors, I've actually found it a whole lot easier. And cross polarization, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is basically where you get the stresses in plastic, sort of things like rulers or protractors or set squares or whatever, coming up as like sort of strong rainbow colors. And the simple way to do it, or the way that I've done it, is actually use my computer monitor, a polarizing filter on the camera. You basically turn your computer monitor to a white background. So just set a white background on your computer monitor, and then place the protractor or ruler onto the monitor. And then basically with your polarizing filter on the camera, just turn it. And what you'll notice is that what happens is the screen actually goes black at a certain point. Now you can shoot straight on, and you could use a macro lens like Will says, or a standard lens, but you can shoot straight on. And as you turn the polarizer, that screen will go black, and the stressors and the colors will come out in the plastic. I'm sure, Will and Kingsley, it's something that you guys have tried in the past.
I've seen it. I've never actually had a go, but very much as you were saying to Will, I'm really looking forward to seeing the fruits of your labours next time, Rog.
No problem. I've done this so many times, but I love it so much because it's a really cool thing to do.
Well, I've tried it the old-fashioned way, which is without the screen, but basically having a polarizing sheet over your light source, and then a polarizing filter on the camera lens. And things like, my favourite subject was sellotape or sticky tape, clear transparent tape, because you get lovely stress patterns in there as well. And if you don't make a horrible mess, because that's very easy to do, but if you're very careful, you can develop nice little sellotape sculptures, if you like, and then cross polarize them. They can be really fun.
And just to complete the picture, Kingsley, obviously we're looking forward to seeing your befores and afters of your recently processed work.
I think my hard drive's just gone down. Weird whirring noise.
So moving on, before we did this first podcast, we did actually put a call out on our website and on our social media. And thanks to those people who got in touch. And obviously all those lines of communication are still open. I'll run through them again at the end of the podcast. But one of them really stood out, which I thought might be a little bit of fun to go through. And a guy called Brian C. Hello, Brian. He's in Oxford. He said to us, what were our first proper cameras and what is our favourite camera of all time? Shall we start with Will? Is that like a plate camera, Will? Fox Talbot spec?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm old, but not that old. Thank you very much. No, it's a great question, actually. And I suppose my favourite camera, my first camera and my best ever camera are kind of closely related. In 1973, I had to think about this. In 1973, I bought a Canon FT-BN. Lovely camera, solid, mechanical, great to use. Lens quality was amazing from Canon lenses, even in those days. But my favourite camera stemmed actually from buying into that Canon system. Because in 1977, the Canon AT1 came out, which is a manual exposure mode only camera. It's basically a cheaper version of the Canon AE1, which was in those days a hugely popular camera. It was one of the very first cameras to use polycarbonate in the body. It was a bit plasticky in some ways, of course. And of course, it was battery reliant, which is something we take for granted now. But anyway, the AT1 is this mechanical camera, manual exposure only camera rather than mechanical. And it was great to use. You could really shoot film through really quickly. Absolutely loved it. Regretted selling it desperately.
Well, you've answered my question. I was about to ask, do you still own either of those cameras?
No, because as you know, I'm a bit of a gear tart, Rog, so I swapped systems a little while further on. I went to Olympus soon afterwards because, I mean, even now I'm continuing trying to save weight. And back in the 70s, when I used to carry 3 cameras around, I used to have a body for infrared, a body for black and white, and a body for color transparency. And my kit bag used to weigh a ton. So I was desperate to save weight. So in the end, I chocked in all my Canon stuff and went for something lighter, which happened to be the Olympus OM system. So that's what, and the OM system was also one of my favorite cameras. But having thought long and hard about it, I took some great pictures on the Canon AT1. So even though I love everything I've bought since and everything I own now, in fact, the Canon AT1 is something I wish I'd kept.
Special place in the Cheung heart for the AT1. What about you, Kingsley? Disc camera as your first ever one, maybe?
Sure, I have got a disc camera somewhere. I never actually had any disc film.
Why did that not surprise me?
Just anything you could lift out of a charity shop. My first camera was a Zenit 11, which I bought from London Camera Exchange in Southampton in 1993. And as anyone who has ever used a Zenit or held one, if they could pick it up, would tell you, they're just these brilliant sort of incredibly rough and ready, built in a volcano somewhere in the Soviet Union. And in fact, my Zenit, which I've got here with me, has made in the USSR underneath it. And I'm just going to give you a nice little shutter. Do you get that?
Yeah.
Nice little. Oh. And not only that, because it's not doesn't have a battery, so what it's got is this clockwork self-timer on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And I seem to recall that they've only got a limited selection of shutter speeds on them, haven't they? Is that right?
It's something like a 500th of a second down to a 30th of a second, I think.
Right.
I mean, I was studying photography at the time as a sort of a module on another course. I just went and did sort of street photography and took pictures of buildings with it. And one of the other lovely things about it was that it came with one of those 1970s embroidered straps that I can't actually now find. And when I was looking for it earlier, I thought, God, I'm going to go on eBay and try and find myself like a cruddy old strap like that, just to kind of go down memory lane. But they made like 1.5 million of these things, and they were kind of fairly well accepted throughout the world.
So what about favorite camera then?
I've got a D850 at the moment, Nikon, and that's like a lot of people describe that as the best DSLR ever made, and I think there's a good case for that because it is brilliant. But the one that I probably enjoyed using the most was the D700, the first full frame, I think, Nikon affordable one anyway. And that was just a sort of going from smaller formats to this kind of big full frame camera was just literally an eye opener. Huge bright viewfinder, everything looked brilliant. 12 megapixel, I think, isn't it? But the image quality was still brilliant. And much like Will said, I really regret getting rid of it. I sold it on, but I do still have a D700, which is an infrared converted one that I bought from Will.
Well, there you go. Well, from my perspective, the first camera that I actually went out and bought was an Olympus OM2 SP, which I'm sure, Will, you probably did a review for that many years ago, but it was quite cutting edge, as I recall. It was all black, and it had a program mode on it and spot metering. And I remember paying something ridiculous like 280 quid for it, which was back in the 1980s was a lot of money to me. But my favorite camera, and it's interesting just to hear that none of us have actually said that our favorite cameras are the cameras that we're actually using right now. My favorite camera has to be my Canon T90. I was going to ask you, Will, do you remember what year that was launched?
To be honest, no. That must be early 90s or late 80s?
1986. 1986. A good year. Certainly a good year for cameras. Back then it was 148,000 yen to buy the body, which is equivalent to about 1,200 quid now. I've done the maths for you. It was also nicknamed in Japan the Tank, which and they actually Canon Japan actually used that on their literature based around the camera. They actually called it the Tank, and it was quite a hefty old thing. It was kind of a bit of a precursor to the Canon EOS range, which obviously launched with the 650, which I think was 1988, 89. Did 4.5 frames per second, which I think at the time was quite rapid for a film camera.
Yeah,
but and unlike you two, I've actually still got it, but it doesn't work. So
there's a paperweight. Yeah,
it went on the blink, but I've kept it for just for good times, really, because it just reminds me of a simpler time when you could actually go out and take pictures and you didn't have to autofocus. So that's my favorite. So anyway, thanks for the question, Brian. Obviously, please, if you've got any other questions that you'd like to ask, if you want to know, for example, what inside leg measurement Kingsley is, we'll answer that. We'll answer what's in Will's camera bag as well.
Just before we started recording this podcast, I had an email come through, which I thought would be worth sharing, because I know a lot of our listeners and our readers are members of camera clubs. But basically, I'm hearing that all the camera clubs are basically shut down for the season, because their season ends in May, June anyway, and then they reconvene in September. So basically what a lot of clubs have actually now done is actually said, we'll stop meeting now and we'll start again in September when, fingers crossed, the world is back to normal. So I got an email from a chap called Steve Mundy, who he and his brother set up a camera club. Basically, they were disaffected with existing traditional camera clubs, shall we say. And he and his brother started a new camera club called F-Stop Photo Group. And they're based in Maidenhead. Anyway, his story basically goes, we had the shutdown of the country, lockdown of the country 2 days ago, and they've already had their first meeting. They're using a software called Zoom, which is a video conferencing software. It costs $11.99 for the pro version when you get 100 people in it. And they've had their first virtual meeting. And one thing he does stress is that even though this is a technology and a lot of his members are of an older generation and less hardware savvy, they've all got into it. And they've even had one of their members apparently is in Trinidad at the moment. So I imagine he's stuck out there. And even he managed to join the meeting. So a shout out to Steve. And what we're going to do is publish the full story in the next issue of Photography News, basically how he did it, what the response and why. So I thought, although you've had a great question from Brian, just to say I just had a great email which I thought was worth sharing with our listeners too.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And you mentioned there the next issue of PN, Will. Why don't you let everybody know what's going to be in that issue?
Well, this is issue 76, which is out from the middle of April. We've talked about ideas of things we're going to do indoors for the next few weeks, months. And there's going to be a feature in there which covers more ideas of what you can do indoors. We've also got 2 major camera tests. We've got the test of the new Fujifilm X100V, which is a compact camera, which is, I must admit, it's amazing. I don't actually own a compact camera, and having used the X100V for a couple of weeks, I think that might change. Well, this is such a nice little camera. It's silent shutter. AF is really very good. So I'm really impressed by that. And the other camera I'm testing at the moment is the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark III. And that was the camera I was using to shoot waterfalls with when I was up in the Dales. So really looking forward to finishing those tests and looking at all the pictures. I'm still sorting through them at the moment. But of course, not only are they in issue, but they'll be in the digital copy on the website too. So people can enjoy seeing the whole gallery of pictures on the website. Of course, obviously, we're more limited in space in the magazine. But those are the highlights right now, Rog. But it's an ongoing flux of content at the moment. Purely because, of course, the world is changing even as we sit here.
That leads me perfectly into being able to just give a load of plugs about how to get in touch with us. If you want to get in touch with us or anybody else who works on the PN team, you can do so at podcast@photographynews.co.uk. The website for the magazine itself is photographynews.co.uk, and that's being regularly updated. Obviously, on there, you can also read the digital issue of Photography News. Every single issue and every single back issue is also available digitally for free, which is available on photographynews.co.uk. Now, we've also got another URL, which is getpn.co.uk. And if you sign up through there between now and the 31st of May, you will be automatically entered into a competition to win an Olympus Tough TG6 camera. You can also get in touch with us on the various social media platforms. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and the handle on all of those is exactly the same. It's @PhotoNewsPN. So that's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at PhotoNewsPN. And the last thing I was going to mention, because I'll get told off if I don't, is that there is a regular competition that we're running on those social media platforms, which is called PN Pick Me. PNPICME, all one word. If you use that hashtag and send us your pictures, then basically you can be entered into our PN Pick Me competition, and we basically pick the best image every month and give it a shout out on the website and potentially in the magazine. So yeah, so do get in touch. Tell us what you think. I think we're just about done. Are we just about done, gentlemen?
I think so. Although I'd like to part of our readers with a final technique tip, if that's okay.
Oh, go on. Yeah.
Well, it's only because we're in these lockdown times, and I value my pictures. I'm very fussy about my pictures. So one thing I'm going to say to everybody is think about your backup. I mean, not just workflow, but think about your backup. And when I come back from a shoot, and I've just done it, I've come back from Yorkshire with loads of memory cards used up. And I've backed it up 3 times before I formatted the cards and reused them. I've made 3 copies of all my files. So I just urge all our readers and our listeners to think about their backup. Their pictures are invaluable, especially pictures of their family and their friends. And you can still shop online if you haven't got enough memory. Go on the website now, order some memory, and just spend time backing up. Because backing up with this stuff takes time as well. It's a real fag, but it's one of those things you can just, load up your hard drive and disappear, have dinner, do your 30-minute exercise out in the open, then come back, and you're probably still waiting for it to finish. But I was going to just end with, take care, everyone, and back up. Whatever you do, back up.
A Will nugget of advice to end the podcast. Well, thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Will. Stay safe, and we will speak again, hopefully in a week or so. And to you too, Kingsley.
Yeah, I'll be back up next time, hopefully.
Oh, marvellous. Heads on a really bad game.
Grown.
Back up, kids. Come on. Do as Uncle Will says.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thanks, guys. Do send us feedback and do get in touch. Okay. Until next time. Cheers now. Bye.